However, upon his arrival at Kesha's kitchen on a clear Tuesday afternoon, and his demand for entry without a warrant, the woman who greeted him at the doorway displayed no apprehension. Kesha Washington, a lifelong resident of Minneapolis who had meticulously built her restaurant from its very foundations, was well versed in her rights, and when she denied him entry, citing the Fourth Amendment with a composed demeanor that unnerved him, Officer Sullivan made a decision that would ultimately cost the city of Minneapolis $4.7 million. Before we proceed, could you share your viewing location? If this is your initial visit to our channel, please consider subscribing. Narratives such as this warrant dissemination and your patronage assists us in illuminating further truths. Sullivan had been a member of the Minneapolis Police Department for 9 years, serving the 3rd Precinct and cultivating a reputation for assertive law enforcement. He had been the subject of 4 civilian grievances, each alleging excessive force or infringements of constitutional liberties, yet none had led to any disciplinary action. His superiors lauded his proactive methodology, his readiness to venture where other officers hesitated. In reality, Sullivan operated under the premise that his badge granted him unfettered access to any location he desired, that the Fourth Amendment's safeguards against unwarranted searches and seizures were mere suggestions rather than binding constitutional mandates. He had entered numerous businesses owned by minorities, restaurants, shops, and service centers, demanding entry, conducting searches, and identifying infractions, whether actual or fabricated. And until that particular Tuesday afternoon, no one had ever refused him. The initial call was received at 1:47 p.m. An anonymous complaint lodged against Kesha's Kitchen, a soul food establishment situated in South Minneapolis. The caller alleged the presence of health code violations, potential employment infringements, and suspicious activities occurring within the kitchen. No specific details were provided, no substantiating evidence offered, merely nebulous accusations that should have been directed to the appropriate regulatory bodies, such as health inspectors, Labor Department officials, or licensing agencies. However, Sullivan bypassed these protocols. He enlisted the assistance of his partner, Officer Lisa Chin, and they proceeded directly to the restaurant. Both officers activated their body-worn cameras as they arrived at the storefront at 2:23 p.m. The afternoon sun blazed, casting sharp, defined shadows across the thoroughfare. Kesha's Kitchen occupied a corner plot, a modest establishment featuring large windows that afforded passers-by a clear view of the interior. The midday rush was beginning to subside, with a handful of patrons still seated, finishing their meals. The savory scent of fried chicken and cornbread wafted from the propped open doorway, carried on the gentle warmth of the afternoon breeze. Kesha Washington was attending to a transaction at the counter, processing a credit card payment for an elderly couple, when she observed the 2 uniformed officers approaching. A knot of apprehension tightened in her stomach. She had been raised in North Minneapolis, witnessing her mother labor through 2 jobs to sustain their household, diligently working her way through culinary school while simultaneously employed at a diner during the evenings, and saving for 5 years to establish her own enterprise. She understood the profound effort involved in creating something from nothing within a community that had endured generations of disproportionate policing, and she was acutely aware of her rights as an American citizen. Sullivan's body camera captured his approach. The footage remained steady as he advanced towards the entrance, his hand resting casually at his side. Chin's camera provided a lateral perspective, recording the storefront, the hand-painted signage that proclaimed Ka's Kitchen, with a small crown accentuating the letter I, and the vibrant plants adorning the window boxes. Sullivan pushed open the door, the soft chime of the bell above announcing his entrance, and his camera documented the interior. Immaculately clean tables, neatly arranged seating, a counter displaying a glass case filled with sweet potato pie and peach cobbler. The kitchen area was visible through a service window at the rear. "Excuse me," Sullivan announced, his voice imbued with an air of authority. "I need to speak with the proprietor." Kesha concluded the transaction, offered a warm smile to the elderly couple, and then turned to face the officers. Chin's camera captured her composed and collected expression. A black woman in her late 30s, her natural hair neatly tied back in a bun, she wore a simple black shirt and an apron. I am the owner, she stated, her voice resonating with the confident warmth of someone who had cultivated her business through exceptional hospitality and diligent effort. How may I assist you? Sullivan moved closer to the counter, his camera meticulously recording his own vantage point as he traversed the dining area. I am Officer Sullivan, Minneapolis PD. We have received a complaint regarding this establishment. I need to conduct an inspection of the premises. Kesha's hands rested calmly on the counter, her posture relaxed yet attentive. Both cameras captured her response. What manner of complaint? That is not your concern at this juncture, Sullivan retorted, his tone dismissive. I require access to your kitchen, your storage facilities, and your employee records. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, bathing the entire scene in brilliant clarity. Kesha tilted her head slightly, her expression remaining unchanged. Officer, I am entirely willing to cooperate with any legitimate inspection. However, I must request to see your warrant. Sullivan's jaw tightened visibly, the muscular movement discernible on Chen's camera from the side. I do not require a warrant. This is a commercial establishment, and we have received a complaint. This grants me the authority to inspect. Actually, officer, it does not, Kesha replied calmly, her voice unwavering. The Fourth Amendment protects my business from unreasonable searches. Unless you possess a warrant or there is an immediate exigency, your entry into the non-public areas of my restaurant requires my consent, and I am withholding that consent without the presentation of a warrant. Chin shifted subtly, her camera angle wavering slightly. She recognized the accuracy of Kesha's statement. She had undergone the same constitutional law training as every other officer, had absorbed lessons on the Fourth Amendment's protections and the prerequisites for warrantless searches, yet she remained silent, unwilling to contradict her partner in front of a civilian. Sullivan's face flushed, the change in coloration evident even in the bright interior illumination. Ma'am, do not complicate matters. I am attempting to act reasonably. If you have nothing to conceal, you should have no objection to my perusal of the premises. Whether I have something to conceal is irrelevant, Kesha stated, her voice still measured, but now possessing a firmer cadence. The pertinent issue is the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment does not cease to exist simply because I own a business. It safeguards me from unreasonable searches. And a search conducted without a warrant, without my consent, and in the absence of exigent circumstances, is by definition unreasonable. Should law enforcement officers be compelled to obtain warrants prior to searching private businesses? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. This situation transcends a single restaurant. It is a critical examination of whether the Fourth Amendment is applied equitably to black business owners, or if a badge is sufficient to override constitutional protections. Sullivan leaned against the counter, his camera capturing his own hands as they gripped the edge. You are refusing a lawful directive from a police officer. That constitutes obstruction. I am exercising my constitutional rights, Kesha corrected, her hands remaining placidly on the counter. That is not obstruction. That is the essence of being an American citizen. If you have probable cause to suspect that a crime is being committed, obtain a warrant. I will await your return, right here. The remaining patrons in the dining area were now observing, their attention drawn to the escalating confrontation. Chen's camera documented their reactions. An elderly gentleman with a newspaper, two women in professional attire, all paused mid-meal, all watching intently. Sullivan straightened, his posture becoming more overtly assertive. Step aside. I am proceeding to inspect your kitchen. No, you are not, Kesha stated, moving to position herself directly in front of the service window. Not without a warrant. Sullivan's hand moved towards the gate separating the counter area from the dining room, his intent clearly signaled. Chen's camera recorded the movement, the reach for the latch. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Move aside, or you will be taken into custody for obstruction. Kesha remained resolute, refusing to budge. Officer, I am not impeding anything. I'm standing within my own restaurant, behind my own counter. You possess no legal right to proceed beyond this point. The Fourth Amendment is unambiguous. No unreasonable searches. If you wish to inspect my kitchen, procure a warrant. Until then, you must depart. The palpable tension within the room was captured by both body cameras. The afternoon sun cast stark contrasts, an interplay of light and shadow, of right and wrong. Sullivan's labored breathing was audible through his microphone, rapid and tinged with anger. "You are making a grave error," he stated, his voice low and menacing. "When I return with that warrant, I will uncover everything. Every infraction, every deficiency, every single thing you are attempting to conceal, and then we shall ascertain just how astute you truly believe yourself to be." "I am not concealing anything," Kesha countered, her voice never faltering in its measured tone, betraying no hint of fear. "I operate a scrupulously managed business. I adhere to every regulation. However, that does not grant you license to infringe upon my rights. Obtain your warrant, officer. Conduct your duties in accordance with the law." Sullivan regarded her for a prolonged moment, his profile clearly visible on Chen's camera, his expression a tumultuous mix of fury and disbelief. He had never encountered such a refusal. In his 9 years of service, he had entered countless businesses, those owned by black individuals, immigrants, and other minorities, and executed searches without warrants, encountering no resistance. This placid defiance, this invocation of constitutional rights, shattered every preconceived notion he held regarding his authority. "Let's proceed," he declared finally to Chin, his voice strained. "We will secure the warrant." He turned towards the exit, his camera recording his view of the doorway. However, before departing, he paused and glanced back at Kesha. "You have just made an adversary, lady. You will come to regret this." "I do not believe I will," Kesha responded quietly, her hand still resting on the counter. "I believe I will recall this as the day I upheld the Constitution." Sullivan and Chin departed, the bell above the door emitting a soft chime as they exited. Both body cameras documented their walk back to their patrol vehicle, parked directly across the street under the bright afternoon sun. Inside the car, Chin finally spoke, her voice tentative. "She is correct, you know. We cannot conduct a search without a warrant unless she provides consent or there is an emergency." "I am fully aware of my actions," Sullivan snapped, his camera focused on the view through the windshield. "Simply call for a warrant. However, the procurement of a warrant necessitates probable cause, a condition that Sullivan lacked. An anonymous tip is insufficient. There must be specific, articulable facts that suggest criminal activity." Sullivan proceeded nonetheless, contacting the on-call judge and outlining the situation. The judge listened attentively, posing pointed inquiries regarding the precise nature of the complaint, the evidence Sullivan had personally observed, and the existence of probable cause. Sullivan's responses were vague and circular, increasingly tinged with desperation. The judge ultimately denied the warrant request. "Officer, an anonymous complaint alleging unspecified violations does not constitute probable cause," the judge stated, her voice clearly captured on Sullivan's body camera, audio feed. "If you possess concrete evidence of criminal activity, return with an affidavit detailing that evidence. However, I will not issue a warrant based on the information you have provided." Sullivan concluded the call, his profound frustration evident on both officers' cameras. "We are returning," he announced. "She will grant us entry. She has the right to refuse," Chin stated cautiously, her camera recording Sullivan's profile as he intently observed the restaurant across the street. "We cannot forcibly enter without a warrant." "Observe me," Sullivan retorted, opening his car door. The timestamp on both cameras indicated 3:15 p.m. They had been absent for less than an hour, yet Sullivan was returning, and this time he was not inquiring. Both body cameras recorded their second approach. The afternoon sun remained strong, the shadows slightly elongated, but visibility was perfect. Sullivan walked with increased speed this time, his posture overtly aggressive, his hand resting near his sidearm in what would later be characterized as an intimidation tactic. Chin followed, her camera capturing her evident reluctance through the lagging pace of her steps. Sullivan pushed through the door without pause, his camera redocumenting the interior. The lunchtime clientele had departed. The dining area was now empty, except for a young woman tidying tables. Kesha emerged from the kitchen, a dish towel in her hands, her expression shifting from welcoming to weary upon seeing Sullivan. "Officer," she stated, her voice carefully modulated, "did you procure your warrant?" "I do not require a warrant," Sullivan declared, his voice amplified now, more aggressive. "I am conducting an inspection under my authority as a law enforcement officer. Step aside." "We have already engaged in this discussion," Kesha replied, placing the dish towel on the counter. "My response remains unchanged. No warrant, no entry. That is the Fourth Amendment, officer. It is not subject to negotiation." Sullivan advanced towards the counter gate, his hand reaching for the latch. "I am proceeding to the rear. You may move aside or face arrest." Kesha positioned herself directly in front of the gate, her body effectively blocking his access. Chen's camera documented the confrontation from the side, both figures clearly visible in the afternoon light filtering through the windows. "You're not coming back here," Kesha stated, her voice escalating now, firm and unequivocal. "You have no warrant, you have no consent, you have no emergency. What you are attempting is unlawful, and I will not permit you to violate my constitutional rights." "You are obstructing a police officer," Sullivan asserted, his hand on the gate latch, exerting pressure. "Move now, or you will be arrested." "Then arrest me," Kesha challenged, remaining stationary. "But understand this. When you do, when you enter my establishment without a warrant, without my consent, you are violating the Fourth Amendment, and I will pursue a lawsuit against you and the city for every cent I can obtain." The young woman clearing tables had retrieved her mobile phone, her hands trembling as she directed the camera towards the unfolding confrontation. Chen's body camera captured her actions. The civilian recording introduced a third perspective to the impending events. Sullivan also observed it, his camera recording the turn of his head, the flash of anger as he noticed the phone. "Put that away," he commanded the young woman curtly. "This is official police business." "She has the right to record," Kesha interjected, still positioned to block the gate. "Just as I have the right to refuse your unlawful search. These are our rights, officer. You cannot abrogate them simply because you possess a badge." Sullivan's face was now flushed crimson, his breathing heavy and audible on his body camera microphone. He had been denied, contradicted, recorded, and challenged. Every ingrained instinct, honed over 9 years of unquestioned authority, urged him to assert control. He forced the gate open, compelling Kesha to step back, and moved into the counter area. Chen's camera meticulously recorded the sequence. The aggressive entry, Kesha's stumble as she was involuntarily propelled backward, her hands instinctively rising in a defensive posture. "You are under arrest," Sullivan declared, reaching for Kesha's arm. "Obstruction of a lawful investigation." "This is not lawful," Kesha protested, attempting to withdraw her arm, her voice escalating. "You have no warrant. This constitutes a Fourth Amendment violation. You're breaking the law." Sullivan firmly grasped both her arms, spinning her around, his body camera documenting his own actions as he produced his handcuffs. The young woman with the phone was now crying, still recording, her voice captured on Chen's camera as she pleaded, "Please, she has done nothing wrong. She merely requested a warrant." The handcuffs clicked shut around Kesha's wrists, the sound sharp and definitive on both body camera audio feeds. Sullivan's camera recorded him securing the cuffs, then his perspective as he began escorting Kesha towards the exit. "Officer Chin, search the kitchen," he ordered. Chin hesitated, her camera recording her feet remaining stationary. "We do not have consent or a warrant," she stated softly. "If we conduct a search now, any findings could be deemed inadmissible." "I have issued you an order," Sullivan responded, his voice hardening. "Search the kitchen." Chen's camera recorded her slow progress towards the kitchen, her evident reluctance palpable in every step. She pushed through the swinging door, and her camera captured a meticulously clean kitchen. Gleaming stainless steel surfaces reflected the overhead lights. Pots and pans hung neatly from racks. A commercial refrigerator hummed softly. Everything was immaculate and well organized. She moved through the space deliberately, opening cabinets, checking the refrigerator, searching for violations that simply did not exist. Her camera documented every detail. A health code certificate prominently displayed on the wall, current and dated. Food storage labels indicating dates and temperatures. Employee hand-washing signs posted in multiple languages. It was a kitchen cleaner than many restaurants she had patronized as a customer. Outside, Sullivan's camera recorded him escorting Kesha to his patrol vehicle, her hands cuffed behind her back, her expression one of resolute determination. The afternoon sun beat down upon them, the street bustling with pedestrians, several of whom paused to observe, some even retrieving their phones to record. "This is illegal," Kesha stated, her voice trembling with controlled indignation. "You know this is illegal. I cited the Fourth Amendment. I requested a warrant. I conducted myself appropriately, and you are arresting me regardless. You should have cooperated," Sullivan retorted, opening the rear door of the patrol car. "Get in." Kesha took a seat in the back of the car. Sullivan's camera recorded her through the metal grate separating the front and rear compartments. Her face was composed, her jaw set with unwavering resolve. She looked directly at the camera, at the lens of Sullivan's body camera, and spoke with distinct clarity. "My name is Keisha Washington. I am a United States citizen. I am being arrested for refusing an unlawful search of my business. Officer Sullivan attempted to enter my restaurant without any emergency. I cited the Fourth Amendment. I requested that he obtain a warrant. He refused and proceeded to arrest me. This arrest is unlawful, and I will be initiating a federal civil rights lawsuit." The statement was captured with impeccable clarity on Sullivan's body camera, every word preserved in high-definition audio. It would ultimately form the cornerstone of her case, a declaration of rights spoken directly into the recording device that would be used as evidence against the officer and the city. Chin emerged from the restaurant, her camera documenting her walk towards the patrol car. She leaned in through Sullivan's window, her voice low but still audible to both microphones. "There is nothing in there. The kitchen is spotless. The health code certificate is current. Everything is in order." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "Get back in. We are taking her in." The journey to the third precinct lasted 20 minutes. Both body cameras remained active, capturing the transit through the afternoon traffic. Sullivan's camera displayed the road ahead, the dashboard clock steadily advancing. 3:42 p.m., 3:55 p.m., 4:03 p.m. Chin's camera occasionally panned back to check on Kesha, who sat in silence, her gaze directed towards the window. At the station, they proceeded with her processing for obstruction of justice, including fingerprinting, photographs, and completion of the requisite forms. Chen's body camera recorded the booking officer's skeptical expression as Sullivan recounted the circumstances of the arrest. "She refused to allow you to search without a warrant," the booking officer inquired, his tone measured. "And you arrested her for that." "She impeded a lawful inquiry," stated Sullivan, his device capturing his own hands as he completed the booking documents. "I possess the authority to conduct an examination. Did you have a warrant?" It was unnecessary. The processing officer exchanged a look with Chen, the expression recorded by her device, but he proceeded with the booking, placing Keisha in a holding area. Sullivan's device documented her being escorted away, her posture erect, her chin held high. She glanced back once directly at Sullivan's device, her demeanor conveying, "This is far from over." Kesha was detained for 6 hours before her release on her own recognizance. The accusations were obstruction of justice and interference with a police investigation. The arrest record was a public document. Her name and booking photograph were entered into the official system. Her establishment's reputation faced potential damage due to its association with criminal allegations. However, Kesha Washington had not dedicated years to cultivating her enterprise within a community that had witnessed far too many transgressions of fundamental rights to be cowed by an unlawful apprehension. 3 days subsequent to her release, she presented herself at the offices of the American Civil Liberties Union. The legal representative who met with her, an individual named Jennifer Torres with 15 years of experience in constitutional jurisprudence, listened to her account with escalating interest. Upon Kesha's conclusion, Torres reclined in her chair, the afternoon sunlight casting patterns on her desk through the slatted blinds. "Do you comprehend the stipulations of the Fourth Amendment?" inquired Torres. Kesha inclined her head. "It safeguards against unreasonable searches and confiscations. It mandates the issuance of warrants predicated on sufficient cause. It represents one of the foundational safeguards that are intended to be applied to each of us uniformly, although we acknowledge that this is not consistently the reality in practice." "Precisely," affirmed Torres, producing a legal notepad. "And Officer Sullivan contravened it. He attempted to search your establishment without a warrant, without your consent, and in the absence of any urgent circumstances. When you declined, a right you absolutely possessed, He apprehended you. This constitutes not merely a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It is reprisal for exercising your constitutionally guaranteed rights. It is the deprivation of rights under the guise of official authority. Torres requested the body-worn camera footage pursuant to Minnesota's public records legislation. Upon its arrival 2 weeks later, she reviewed the entirety of it. Both officers' complete recordings, from their initial approach through the arrest and booking process, were examined. The footage was damning. It depicted Kesha calmly citing the Fourth Amendment, repeatedly soliciting a warrant, and articulating the constitutional requisites. It illustrated Sullivan's aggressive demeanor, his threats, his unlawful entry into her business, his retaliatory apprehension, and, most critically, it revealed Chen's search of the kitchen conducted without a warrant or consent, discovering nothing but a pristine, lawfully operated establishment. The criminal charges levied against Kesha were dropped within a month. The prosecutor, after reviewing the body camera footage, chose not to proceed with the case. In her dismissal memorandum, she wrote, "The defendant repeatedly and accurately cited her Fourth Amendment rights. The arresting officer lacked a warrant, consent, and exigent circumstances justifying entry into the non-public areas of her business. The arrest appears to be retaliatory in nature. In the interest of justice, all charges are dismissed." However, the dismissal of criminal charges was insufficient. Torres initiated a federal civil rights lawsuit. The case was styled as Kesha Washington versus City of Minneapolis, Officer James Sullivan, and Officer Lisa Chen. The complaint alleged infringements of the Fourth Amendment, false arrest, unlawful search, retaliation for the exercise of constitutional rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The city's initial response was dismissive. They extended an offer of $15,000 to settle, a nominal sum that affronted both Kesha and her attorney. Torres declined. "This is not about monetary compensation," she informed Kesha during a strategy session at her office. "This is about establishing that the Fourth Amendment is applicable to everyone, that minority business owners possess the same constitutional protections as any other individual, that law enforcement officers cannot conduct searches without warrants simply at their whim, and that retaliation for asserting one's rights is unacceptable." The case proceeded to trial 18 months following Kesha's arrest. The courtroom was replete with civil liberties advocates, minority business proprietors, community organizers, and residents of South Minneapolis who viewed Kesha's situation as their own. The body camera footage was presented on the second day of the trial. The jury viewed both cameras concurrently on split screens, showcasing Sullivan's perspective and Chen's perspective of the identical events. They observed Kesha politely yet firmly cite the Fourth Amendment. They witnessed Sullivan's escalating demands. They observed the illicit entry, the forceful search, the retaliatory apprehension. They noted Kesha's statement from the rear of the patrol vehicle, her clear articulation of her rights, and the violation of those rights. As the footage concluded, the courtroom fell silent. Several jurors exhibited palpable anger, their expressions captured by the courtroom's own recording devices. Kesha testified for 3 hours. She explained, "Growing up in Minneapolis, witnessing her community endure excessive policing, acquiring knowledge of her rights because she understood she might require them. She recounted the process of establishing her business, generating employment opportunities in her neighborhood, and becoming a cornerstone of the community. I understood my rights because I was compelled to," she informed the jury, her voice unwavering despite the palpable emotion. "I have observed too many individuals in my community have their rights transgressed. When Officer Sullivan insisted on conducting a search without a warrant, I was fully cognizant of what was transpiring. The Fourth Amendment stipulates that I am entitled to security in my property against unreasonable searches. When he demanded entry, I was exercising that right, and he apprehended me for doing so." Torres summoned a professor of constitutional law as an expert witness. Professor Elizabeth Chen from the University of Minnesota Law School elucidated the Fourth Amendment in clear, comprehensible terms. The Fourth Amendment provides protection against unreasonable searches. She testified, "For a commercial establishment, in the absence of consent or exigent circumstances, law enforcement requires a warrant. An anonymous complaint lacking specific allegations of criminal conduct does not constitute probable cause for a warrant, let alone justify a warrantless search. Ms. Washington was entirely accurate in her interpretation of the law. Officer Sullivan's demand for a search and his subsequent arrest when she refused violated clearly established constitutional rights. Sullivan's testimony proved to be a disaster. Under cross-examination, Torres systematically dismantled his justifications. You testified that you possess the authority to search without a warrant. What authority? My authority as a law enforcement officer to investigate complaints. But the Fourth Amendment mandates a warrant for searches, does it not? Under certain circumstances. In what circumstances may law enforcement search a commercial establishment without a warrant or consent? Sullivan hesitated. When there is probable cause. But you did not possess probable cause, did you? You had an anonymous tip with no specific allegations. The judge denied your request for a warrant, did he not? Yes, because there was insufficient probable cause. The judge indicated there was not enough information. Because there was insufficient probable cause, Torres reiterated, and yet you returned to Ms. Washington's restaurant and attempted to force entry nonetheless. I had an obligation to investigate. You had an obligation to adhere to the Constitution, retorted Torres, her voice escalating. The Fourth Amendment is not a suggestion. It is not optional. It is the supreme law of the land, and you violated it. The city attempted to assert that Sullivan was protected by qualified immunity, arguing that a reasonable officer could have believed his actions were lawful. Torres refuted this assertion with the body camera footage. Ladies and gentlemen, she stated to the jury during her closing argument, Ms. Washington cited the Fourth Amendment. She elucidated the warrant requirement. She requested that Officer Sullivan obtain a warrant. She conducted herself impeccably, and Officer Sullivan apprehended her regardless. That is not a reasonable error. That is a deliberate violation of clearly established constitutional rights. That is precisely what qualified immunity does not shield. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Upon their return, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The damages phase extended for an additional week. The jury heard testimony regarding Kesha's emotional distress, her apprehension of law enforcement, and her trauma resulting from being handcuffed and arrested for exercising her rights. They heard from patrons who ceased frequenting her establishment following her arrest, concerned about being associated with an individual whose booking photograph they had seen online. They heard from a business valuation expert who quantified the financial detriment to her restaurant's reputation and revenue. When the jury announced the damages, the courtroom erupted in applause. $2.3 million in compensatory damages for emotional distress, lost business revenue, and the violation of constitutional rights. $2.4 million in punitive damages specifically calculated to penalize the city for permitting officers such as Sullivan to operate without adequate training or accountability. The total amounted to $4.7 million. Kesha wept uncontrollably, surrounded by her attorney, her family, and members of her community. Torres stood quietly observing the jury. These 12 ordinary citizens who had examined the evidence and determined that the Fourth Amendment held significance, that minority business owners possessed the same rights as all others, and that a badge did not confer upon officers the authority to disregard the Constitution. Sullivan was terminated within days of the verdict. Chen, who had reluctantly participated in the search, received a suspension and mandatory constitutional law retraining. The Minneapolis Police Department announced comprehensive reforms, including compulsory Fourth Amendment training for all officers, new protocols requiring supervisor approval prior to any warrantless searches of businesses, and a review of body camera footage for all arrests involving alleged obstruction when the suspect asserts violations of constitutional rights. Kesha utilized a portion of her settlement to expand her restaurant, employing additional staff from the community and establishing job training programs for young individuals. She emerged as a prominent advocate in Minneapolis, delivering speeches at community gatherings, educating individuals about their constitutional rights, and recounting her experience of standing up to a law enforcement officer and prevailing. The body camera footage became an educational instrument in law schools and police academies across the nation. a stark illustration of the consequences when officers disregard the Fourth Amendment and how citizens can and ought to assert their rights. And in Minneapolis, Kesha Washington's case attained legendary status. A reminder that the Constitution affords equal protection to all, that rights asserted are rights preserved, and that at times the most potent act of civic engagement is simply a refusal when authority oversteps its boundaries. If you believe the Fourth Amendment should protect all Americans equitably, that law enforcement requires warrants to search our businesses, and that standing firm for constitutional rights should be lauded rather than penalized, please press the subscribe button and activate notifications. Tomorrow, we present another narrative of courage and constitutional principles that you will not want to miss, because the truth, captured on body cameras and defended in legal proceedings, possesses the power to remind us all that we, the people, bestow authority upon the government, not the converse.